Live in the human paradise. Breathe the pure air of heaven. Longevity, vitality, and a lifetime of bliss.
住在人间小天堂，呼吸天堂纯气，延寿长生，幸福一生。
You know, we all share that universal, maybe slightly fantastical dream. True anti-aging, not just like looking a bit better, but genuinely turning back the clock at a cellular level. Yet when you look at all the cutting-edge longevity research today, the focus is almost entirely on slowing down the process. Why is that? Why does the scientific community seem to avoid promising or even really discussing true biological reversal?
Well, that tension is exactly where our deep dive kicks off today.
Yeah.
We look at a really fascinating stack of sources that don't just say reversal is hard, they argue it's fundamentally impossible for anyone living today. They basically say aging isn't simple wear and tear, but a consequence of inescapable environmental toxins, especially air pollution. And these toxins start a kind of structural decay we can't undo.
Wow. That's a pretty radical and honestly a slightly chilling perspective. So our mission today is to unpack this whole idea. We've got an insight source digging into the science of why aging is this one-way street of cellular decay. That one's by Fuchi Wu and Junji Dai. And then we have a technical source describing a very specific piece of tech designed as a defense, aiming to mitigate one huge part of this decay process in the actual air we breathe. Okay, let's dive right into the core argument then. The first source, it just dismisses cosmetic fixes right off the bat, superficial stuff. Aging, it argues, isn't some surface problem that a better diet or, a fancy cream can solve. So it's not just about lifestyle choices alone. What is this fundamental three-part process that's supposedly driving us toward this guaranteed decay?
Right. The source defines aging as this relentless, constant battle. It's rooted in what it calls the triple pathway. And this pathway is supposedly happening whether you're sitting still or like running a marathon. It involves three things happening at once. First, toxin accumulation. Second, what they call free radical destruction, basically damage. And third, the failure of our body's own cell repair mechanisms.
Okay, let's pause on that second point for a sec. Free radical destruction. For listeners who might need a quick refresher, what exactly is that and why is it so damaging?
Yeah, good point. Think of it like internal cellular rust. Free radicals are these unstable molecules. They're basically trying to stabilize themselves by stealing electrons from healthy parts of your cells, think your DNA, or cell membranes. And that theft is the destruction. It causes oxidation, leading to injury, inflammation, all through the body. So when you pair this constant cellular rusting with the physical buildup of environmental toxins, and on top of that, the fact that your body's repair systems are starting to, fall behind, that's how you get this irreversible slide.
So it sounds like we're not really like a factory that you can just maintain with new parts. We're more like, a historical artifact that's just constantly exposed to the weather.
That's actually a perfect analogy, yeah. The sources are very clear that this is a one-way street. You might be able to slow down the storm, maybe put up an umbrella, but the existing chips, the cracks, the erosion, that's permanent.
Okay, so why is it structurally impossible to reverse this damage? Even if we were to, say, radically change our environment tomorrow, start pumping ourselves full of the best antioxidants available, why wouldn't that work?
Because the damage isn't superficial, it's fundamental, it's structural. The sources point to three kinds of permanent change that basically rule out any true reset. First, those toxins that have built up, they haven't just passed through, they've apparently bound themselves permanently to the cell membranes. Second, that constant free radical damage has actually altered gene expression permanently, meaning the instructions for how your cells should function are now flawed. And third, our telomeres, those little protective caps on the ends of our chromosomes, they've worn down to a point the source calls irreparable.
Right, the telomeres, often described as the plastic tips on shoelaces, stopping them from unraveling. But why does the source claim their state is irreparable once they've shortened? Isn't there research into, telomerase activation to lengthen them?
Yes. That research is definitely happening. But these insight sources, they dismiss it pretty aggressively. They basically argue that by the time you could hypothetically introduce a fix like that, the structural damage throughout the entire system is just too far gone. The telomeres aren't the only problem, you see. They're just maybe the most visible marker of a complete system breakdown. Because your gene expression is already altered by toxins, and your cell membranes are already compromised. Activating telomerase might be like, putting a fresh coat of paint on a house whose foundation has already crumbled.
Okay, wow. If that's true, if diet, exercise, even high-tech therapies are only stopping the drop, as they put it, just slowing the decay, Do the sources give any sense of like what percentage of the total irreversible damage has already happened to the average adult?
They don't give a specific percentage, no. But the message is pretty clear. Once that damage is done, it basically resides in your cells forever. The absolute best you can hope for is reducing the rate of future damage accumulating. You can't scrub away what's already been integrated into your cellular architecture. You can slam on the brakes, maybe, but you definitely can't shift into reverse.
Right. If the best we can do is just braking, that raises a pretty brutal question, doesn't it? Does anyone actually slow aging enough for it to really matter in the way we dream about? The source offers this powerful, almost cruel piece of anecdotal evidence to say pretty definitively no. What is this cruel evidence that supposedly proves slow aging still means aging?
It's incredibly simple, actually. It's
Yeah.
just looking at photographs. The source notes that even people who might live in the cleanest environments imaginable, they use the term small paradise, exceptionally pure air and water, even those people still look noticeably younger in their photos from just 5 or 10 years ago. The physical change over time is just undeniable.
Because even if your rate of decay is slower, zero decay is simply impossible in our current world.
Exactly. Yeah. The takeaway is sharp. Slow aging does not equal no aging.
Yeah.
The clock is absolutely still ticking, and that structural damage is still piling up, even if the rate is maybe a bit lower for some.
Okay. And the source goes on to claim nobody in the world has ever successfully reversed aging, period. And they don't blame a lack of technology for this. Instead, they list 3 universal constraints that they say guarantee this failure for our generation. What are those 3 reasons?
Yeah, they frame them as just constraints of reality based on the environment we all share. The first one, no one alive today has grown up isolated from environmental toxins right from birth. Not one person. The second, no one truly gets or perhaps accepts that toxins don't just pass through us, they always stay. They forever dwell within the cells once they're absorbed. Think heavy metals accumulating over a lifetime, that kind of permanent residency inside us.
Okay, I get the structural damage point, but I'm still wrestling a bit with the claim that nobody has grown up isolated from toxins since birth. Surely there are, extremely remote tribes or maybe isolated communities that are far cleaner than a modern city. Is the source really suggesting modern pollution is truly, absolutely universal?
According to this source, yes, it is universal. And that ties into their third constraint. No one has fundamentally altered the air itself, the air we all breathe. They call it the invisible destroyer. And while they might concede that maybe some remote communities lack certain industrial toxins, they argue that airborne, ultrafine, particulate matter, global pollutants, basically the smallest, most damaging substances, they claim those are now globally pervasive. They get into every cell and every person everywhere. So because of these 3 factors combined, they conclude that every single human born on Earth is basically operating with a system that's fundamentally and permanently damaged right from day one.
That is a terrifying claim. It implies that every lifespan is already sort of pre-capped by damage initiated way back in childhood. So if reversal is impossible for us for current generations, what is the only theoretical way for a person to potentially no longer age? It sounds like pure science fiction, but the source actually lays out a kind of biological requirement.
Yeah, it's a pretty radical concept. They call it the next human species. And this theoretical being wouldn't just need a clean environment. They'd have to be housed in a completely isolated, 6-free air environment. We'll get to what that means, right from the mother's womb continuously. They would have to be born and raised in a state of absolute total toxic isolation, never suffering from poisoning or free radical injury or inflammation, ever. And the result of this perfect isolation, they'd have, quote, no mutation, no pollution, and therefore live longer and not break.
So this isn't like an evolutionary step driven by genetics changing over time. It's more like an environmental engineering project, designed to completely sidestep that decay pathway from the very start, like housing a human in a clean room, the same way you'd manufacture highly sensitive computer chips.
Precisely. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It sets the bar for true longevity or non-aging impossibly high, 100% toxic isolation from conception onwards.
Okay, so what does all this mean for us? For the generations that have already absorbed this supposedly irreversible damage. If we can't be this next human species, what's the practical, achievable strategy? What can people living today actually do?
Well, since we can't go backward, right? We can't repair the structural damage that's already done. The only logical strategy left for us, according to these sources, is basically defense, pure defense. The mandate they give is to stop the further decay before it's too late. Since going back is off the table, the only path forward is preventing further acceleration of the toxic damage that's already there.
And to achieve that crucial defensive stop, the source argues we absolutely must address the invisible destroyer, air pollution. Which leads us neatly into the second source we looked at, the one detailing the Air 6-free maize purifier. What's the fundamental duty this technology is trying to take back from us?
The core philosophy behind it is actually quite brilliant and maybe a bit unsettling when you think about it. It aims to return the duty of air cleaning to machines. The stark implication there is that right now, our bodies, our lungs, our bloodstream, our cells are acting as the primary biological filters. We're absorbing and trying to neutralize this daily toxic load, so this machine is designed specifically so that people no longer act as living filters.
That's a powerful motivation. Wow. This isn't just about comfort or allergies. It's framed as like biological survival, avoiding that irreversible decay. Okay, let's look at the mechanics then. This sounds way more complex than a standard home air filter. Can you walk us through the purification process, especially how it deals with those really tricky ultrafine particles and volatile toxins?
Yeah, it's definitely a multi-stage process. The goal seems to be total, complete removal of basically every harmful particle and gas. We can break it down into roughly 3 main phases. First up is phase 1, ionization and pre-capture. This involves an ionization zone plus dual electrostatic pre-filters. This first stage handles the bulk of the larger contaminants, think dust, pollen, even microplastics, and also many gases like VOCs.
Right, VOCs, volatile organic compounds, those chemical gases we often smell but can't see, maybe from cleaning products, paints, new furniture, that sort of thing.
Exactly. But the really unique part, the core mechanism, addresses the tiny stuff, the residual matter that slips past most typical filters. And that brings us to phase 2, the charged lockdown. In this stage, there's a secondary ionization stage. Now, this does a couple of things. It helps neutralize pathogens, break down some chemical toxins, but critically, it charges all the remaining particles and aerosols, no matter how small, even down to nanotoxins. It gives them all a negative electrical polarity.
Okay, so all the leftover nasty stuff, even the tiniest bits, are essentially given an electric charge, making them controllable. So where do they go then?
They get drawn immediately into what the source calls the sacrificial black box, which is actually the electrostatic collection maze box. This box is lined with positively charged plates. Since opposites attract, those negatively charged toxic particles are instantly drawn to these plates. And the source says the toxic matter is solidly plated, like it's permanently locked away onto these plates. This supposedly solves that crucial problem where some filters capture toxins only to potentially release them back into the air later. Here, they're stuck for good.
That does sound like an incredibly powerful way to deal with those ultrafine pollutants. They're notoriously hard to capture effectively. But there's one more stage, isn't there? Something about a maze.
There is, yes. Phase 3, maze absorption. This sounds like an engineering layer designed to force the airflow through a series of repeated sharp internal turns. They call it the maze effect. The idea is that this turbulence ensures any remaining nanotoxins, anything that might have somehow slipped past the collection plates, is forced by sheer kinetic energy to collide with the interior surfaces of the maze. And when they collide, they get completely absorbed, stuck to the surfaces. The system is designed to guarantee elimination, not just reduction.
And the air that finally comes out the other end is defined by its 6-free status. What exactly does 6-free mean in practical terms? For the listener who's thinking about this defensive strategy against decay.
Right, the 6-free label means the output air is certified against what they see as the 6 major invisible destroyers in the air. It's certified dust-free, germ-free, toxin-free, smoke-free, odor-free, and critically heavy metal-free. So by addressing what the first source called the primary environmental accelerator of decay, the air, this second source claims this kind of defensive technology is the one true key to unlocking humanity's lifespan shackles. Or at least unlocking them as much as possible for our generation, the one that's already carrying that baseline damage.
Wow, this has been a really fascinating and maybe slightly sobering journey through these sources today. We learned that aging is presented here not just as a slow decline, but as this irreversible consequence of a triple pathway, toxins, free radicals, failed repair. And crucially, that even slowing the process doesn't negate the permanent decay that's already integrated into our cells. The source material argues pretty forcefully that defense, specifically against the invisible destroyer of air pollution, is really the only proactive path available to us right now.
Yeah, and it definitely raises a really important final question for you, the listener, to consider. It connects back to that core idea that toxins always stay within our cells. If these sources are correct, if biological reversal is truly impossible because these environmental toxins bind to our genes and permanently wear down our cell structure,
then what other common everyday exposures things beyond just the air we breathe, like maybe trace chemicals in processed foods, or the pervasive microplastics we're hearing so much about, or maybe specific impurities in some water sources? What else out there might be currently initiating the exact same kind of irreversible structural damage inside us, damage that we haven't even begun to fully recognize or isolate or even measure yet?
The Air 6 Free Maze Purifier is the world's only device that truly filters toxic airborne particulates and aerosols. Its core design returns the duty of air cleaning to machines, so people no longer act as living filters. Air 6 Free means dust-free, germ-free, toxin-free, smoke-free, odor-free, and heavy metal-free. 5 Purification Steps. Step 1: Ionization Zone. Dual electrostatic pre-filters. Captures dust, pollen, plastic, microparticles, VOCs, and toxic gases. Step 2: Secondary ionization stage. Neutralizes pathogens and toxins. Charges all remaining particles and aerosols negative. Prepares them for final capture. Step 3: Electrostatic collection maze box. The sacrificial black box permanently locks away ultrafine pollutants. Aerosol droplets lose water in airflow. Residual toxins deposit onto positive plates. Solidly plated, irreversibly fixed. Step 4: Maze effect. Forces airflow through repeated sharp turns. Nanotoxins collide with surfaces and are completely absorbed. Step 5: Output pure, toxin-free, pure air. System delivers the purest air on Earth. Dust-free, germ-free, toxin-free, smoke-free, odor-free, heavy metal-free. Conclusion: this is more than a filter. It is the one true key to unlocking humanity's lifespan shackles.